Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our virtual Meet the Expert workshop. My name is Stefan and I'm part of the My World of Work Live team here at Skills Development Scotland. My World of Work Live is about helping you to understand future careers and what skills these careers may require. So in today's session, we're going to cover a quick overview of the finance industry. We're going to have a look at some of the opportunities within the sector. And I'm then going to introduce you to Gillian Chivinge from the abrdn. We would also encourage you to get involved as much as possible and ask as many questions as you would like, and we will do our best to get through as many as we can. I would just like to let you know that today's session is being recorded so that young people who could not make it today can still access the resources, and it will be made available for everyone to watch on the My World of Work YouTube channel. That means that you can go back and rewatch everything that has been talked about today. Again, anything that you've maybe missed, you could go back and you could listen to that again. At the end of the session, a feedback link will also be provided, and we ask if you could spare a couple of minutes just to fill that out to help us improve sessions going forward. That would be really appreciated. Please don't worry as well, all the questions that you do ask in the question and answer section, they are anonymous if you choose to keep them anonymous. And just before I now introduce you to the expert for today, let me just give you a bit of an insight into the industry itself. So the industry now, 190,200 people currently work in the financial services industry within Scotland. As of 2020, the median advertised salary for jobs in the industry was 35,100. The financial services also adds an estimated 9.634 million to the overall Scottish economy, and there are also around 28,865 businesses operating in finance currently. So the future of the finance industry, due to the COVID pandemic, the jobs market is constantly changing. All the future figures are estimated. The industry will need an estimated 13,000 jobs to be replaced or created between 2020 and 2023. Replacement will be needed for the sector is predicted to grow as well for 28,000 jobs between 2023 and 2030. And digital skills will also be highly in demand. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an insight into the industry as a whole. I'm just now going to pass over to Gillian, and Gillian will give a bit of an introduction.
Hi there, Gillian. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. So I work for a company called abrdn, which is named after the city, was formerly Standard Life or Standard Life Investments. It's a full service investment manager, and basically that means that we take money, and it could be from, say, a pension fund or an insurance company or individuals. We pool it together and invest it in different things. So for example, it could be property, residential, or even like a shopping centre. It could be infrastructure, so we might invest in a bridge. It could be debt, so it means that you could invest in, when people borrow money, you could essentially invest in that. And you can also invest in equities in companies, like if you wish, you can invest in Amazon or Facebook or Twitter, for example. So these are the sorts of things that we invest in. The division that I'm in is equities, so I focus on investing in companies in particular. We employ about 5,000 people globally. That's across 52 locations spanning from New York to Tokyo, Sao Paulo in Brazil, and we are headquartered here in Scotland. And so, yeah, that's really, really great because there are lots of travel opportunities. So people would choose to put money into an investment management firm, to give you a bit of understanding as to why we exist, because they may want to take their money, which is say £100, and in the hope of turning it into £110. And they might want to do that because over time there's something called inflation. So your money gets worth less as time goes on. So we try to increase the value of that money. But also because maybe people have some investment hopes and opportunities and would like to make a better life for themselves, for example. So that's a couple of reasons why people might want to invest in investment management. So my story is, so I was born in Zimbabwe, but I grew up in Nottingham. I went to the University of Aberdeen and I live in Edinburgh ordinarily, but I'm currently in London because of COVID. So I joined the grad scheme back in 2017, but I didn't always know that I actually wanted to be where I am now. So I applied to study accounting and finance at university, and I was sort of relatively lucky because I was fairly good when it came to doing GCSEs. I managed to get pretty good grades without working too hard. But then when it came to A level, I assumed, okay, well, which is obviously I would say the equivalent of your highers or an advanced highers. I thought, oh, I can put in the same amount of effort and I'll definitely get the same great grades. And all those grades were what were used to try and determine my university place. But it came to getting the exam results and it was like the floor had been taken away from beneath me because I didn't get the grades, lost my university place, didn't know where I was going to be going or living or studying like 2 weeks after that date. And you know, when you're 17 or 18, that can feel like it's the end of the world. I was like, oh my God, this is the worst day of my life. But little did I know it ended up being the best day, because I ended up going to university that I really loved, Aberdeen, where I had loads of opportunities to make friends. I went on exchange to Hong Kong. I studied abroad in the US and worked abroad in the US. And I just met some really cool people. And all of that, I wouldn't have had the chance to do at university. But later on, I will talk about the fact that there are routes into investment management that don't require you to go to university. For example, we've got a trainee scheme, which you can do for a year, that requires no qualifications at all and no specific skills. I checked the website, it says you just need to be enthusiastic. So that's a little bit about myself, a little bit about the company, and I can get a bit more into the role as the session goes on if you like, Stefan.
A really good introduction there. What type of tasks do you do on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, so I've got quite a varied role, but I'd say the core part of my task right now is to try and research certain industries, then pick certain companies that are interesting with the industry. So for example, I've recently been researching the cell and gene therapy industry. So for those of you who are doing biology, I dropped it, which I now am really regretting because I'm having to learn it now from scratch. So that's basically the industry which helps create medicines based on our specific genetic information or our DNA. So I need to research what is cell and gene therapy, why is it of interest, what are the companies doing in that space, what are the reasons why the industry is growing. So some of the reasons might be like there's more investment into cell and gene therapy, the scientists are making new discoveries in cell and gene therapy, because especially in the UK we've got an aging population, so we need more healthcare for the elderly, so more demand for certain types of healthcare. So I need to look at the drivers. I'll look at which companies are therefore in this space that we can invest in, which will grow. So on the one hand, it helps the company because they get funding indirectly. And on the other hand, it means that we hopefully put money into a company where the share price, so what it's worth, you could essentially say, increases, which makes money for our clients, who could be pension funds, insurance companies, or individuals. So once I've looked at the whole industry, I then look at specific companies. So my task would be to do a lot of research, speak to the management team, so the CEO and the CFO, so the people who run the company, and do a lot more reading and speak to individuals called investment bankers who do a lot more research on the company. So I might have like a big research report, and the sort of questions I'm asking is, what does this company do? Why do they do it? Who's the competition? Who else is in that space? Are there any what you call ESG considerations? That's environmental, social, and governance, meaning what impact does this company have on the environment? What are the labour practices? Is there any risk of child labour? Is there good, gender or ethnic equality on the board? And that's also forms part of the G of the governance. So asking all these questions: what is the risk? How do we value this company? Do we think that the share price will go up? All of those sorts of tasks. So I'd say that's my key role. And then another small thing that I do on the side is support my boss in helping manage the relationships between what's called the buy side and the sell side, but basically the investment bankers and the investment managers. So I'm on the side of the investment managers, and we're their clients. They provide us with lots of services. So yeah, I'd say that they're my core tasks on a day-to-day basis.
Thank you, Gillian. And quite a lot happens there, really. It sounds like a very varied role. So I can imagine that you need a lot of skills for that as well. So Gillian, what kind of skills would you say are best for your role?
Okay, yeah, for sure. There are certain skills that are best, but I'd like to also say that you can develop them in time. So don't worry if you don't have them at this stage. But funny, I would say number one is analytical skills. So that's a case of looking at getting a lot of information, processing that information, and then having sort of an argument for and an argument against, and then making a conclusion. And many of you will already be doing this at school, particularly in subjects like history and English, where anywhere where you've got two sides of a story or a coin, and you need to come to your own conclusion. So analytical skills. Also, so to an extent, processing data, but there's not a huge amount of that. Another one would be communication, because I just mentioned that we do write some research reports, which I swear are more interesting than it sounds, I can promise you that. And so written communication skills are useful, but it doesn't mean you need long and flowery language. It's actually being able to make a point clearly and succinctly in as sort of like little space as possible, because the managers who you're going to give your report to don't have a huge amount of time. But also the verbal communication, because once you've done your research, you then have a conversation with your senior people in the team. They're the ones who make the final decision to say, yes, we want to buy stock in Amazon. Yes, or no, we don't want to buy stock in Microsoft. So you need to sort of persuade them verbally as they ask you questions about their stock. It's like, oh, but you said that management did this. Why is that? Or can you tell us a bit more about, their competition, for example? So communication, analytical skills, and definitely teamwork. So even though I'm a researcher, that's part of my job title, I do spend a lot of time working with other people. So being able to collaborate with people, I think, is really useful. So I'd say they're the 3 key skills.
Excellent, thank you. And Gillian, you had mentioned like the other offices and things like that as well. Have you ever traveled to other offices through your job role as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a really cool role that I'm in, actually. So firstly, I started on the graduate scheme. So there are 2 routes in, as I mentioned. There's one going through a traineeship, which is sort of an apprenticeship, and another is through the graduate scheme. So you do an internship, you get on the 2-year grad scheme. And the one that I was on was 6 4-month rotations. So I did 3 rotations in London, 2 rotations in Edinburgh, and 1 rotation in Copenhagen in Denmark. And they're all, if you're rotating away from your home office, then they pay for everything, which is really great. And you've got the comfort of being still with your own firm but abroad, so you still get that support that you'd hope for. I was just before COVID, supposed to be going to the Singapore and Hong Kong offices because we had a conference that I was supposed to be attending. So that was going to be great. I was looking forward to that. I'm hoping that will still be the case, next year. And also, we have a lot of colleagues who will go and just spend a year in a different office just because they want a different experience, which I think is really great. I think I'll try and do the same. And finally, so because I work in a team where we invest in companies from all over the world, so it could be a Chinese steelmaking company, it could be a tech firm in Brazil, the team members really feel that it's beneficial to actually go to those places to see the factory, to meet management before they make a decision as to whether they want to spend, put millions of pounds into this company. So quite often when I was in the Edinburgh office, there'd be 1 or 2 people away because they'd be in Russia, or they'd be in Singapore, or they'd be in Spain. So there are lots of travel opportunities in investment management.
Brilliant. And again, seems like a lot of traveling there involved in the role that you can get into as well, which is really good, Gillian. So thank you for that. As a young person, do I need to go to university to work in the finance sector?
So absolutely not. So the finance sector is huge, and I'm just a part of a really, really small section called investment management. So in the wider industry, you've got, if you look at the accountancy firms, for example, they do accounting, tax, consulting, and I think a couple of other services. They have huge schemes where I think thousands of people join straight out of school. And I think it's called, it could be a Bright Start. They're called different things at different firms. But they're absolutely, you can finish, I think it's age 17 and join them, you qualify with them, and then 5 years down the line, you would have the same qualification in terms of accounting or finance qualification as someone who'd gone to university, but you're actually a few years ahead because they would have spent 3 or 4 years at uni. I would say, so that's one option, and there are lots of options even within my firm where you don't need to go to university and you can get a very, very good job. In the actual investing team, so the companies like mine where you actually are investing the money in the firms, I'd be lying if I said that most people didn't go to university, because they did. However, we've now started to see coming through investment analysts and research analysts who have come through traineeships and schemes. So it is up to you. And I think one thing I'd also love to say is that we saw the statistics, 190,000 working in financial services in Scotland. Now, there are sort of two ways that you can look at working in finance. One is most firms have a finance department. So Microsoft has a finance department, Boots has a finance department, John Lewis has a finance department. So you can do finance within any firm, or you can go and work within financial services, but the jobs that you're doing are not necessarily finance jobs. So we've got people who work in project management, we've got HR people, we've got marketing people, all working under the financial services umbrella. So in many cases, you won't need to go to university for some of those roles as well. So it really depends on what you want to do. So it might make your life a bit easier if you go to university, but I don't believe it's going to stop you. There are lots more apprenticeships and traineeships becoming available every day.
Brilliant. And off the back of that, Gillian, like you seem very passionate about your job. What would you say are the most enjoyable parts of your job?
I would say I'm getting, paid to learn cool things about the world for a living. So my next research project is going to be on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin and learning about that. And the next one that I'm going to do is learning about electric vehicles and what goes into an electric vehicle and which companies help make electric vehicles. And, I have to try and think about what the world will look like in 5 or 10 years time. So I'm thinking about autonomous, like self-driving cars and renewable energy. So I love that. I'm just learning cool things about the world on a day-to-day basis. I love meeting the different people, whether it's meeting management, meeting the brokers, meeting up with my colleagues. I like the travel element of it. So there's lots to it. I also like the fact that you get to use your own judgment. So there's no right answer in our industry. So when you hear, these words, which probably sound quite abstract now, stock market, FTSE, all of these terms, there can be a bit of volatility, and that's because no one ever knows exactly how things are going to go. So you can use your best judgment and see how things will turn out. But it's just nice to know that you have to use your own brain, and people care about your own judgment, and it's satisfying when it goes well. Less satisfying when it doesn't go well. When it does go well, it's worth it.
And Gillian, with everything, I suppose, in life, is there challenges there? What would you say are the challenges within your job role as well?
So I think what I like most, it's two sides of the same coin. It's also what I find most challenging. There is no right answer. 1 + 1, even though I work in finance, you'd think 1 + 1 is always 2. Not necessarily, not in investments. You'll never know why the share price of a company really went up or down. There could be other factors. There could have been a hurricane that impacted the company. It could be someone in the management team left. It could be you thought you saw something great in this product and actually the product wasn't as good as you thought it was. So it's difficult because that no one will ever know. There's no crystal ball. You can't read the future. You just need to be right more often than you are wrong. And also I mentioned that I love learning new things. For me, that's really, really fun because I'm a curious person who likes learning stuff. But right now I'm supposedly the expert in cell and gene therapy at my company, which is like a lot of pressure. So there's no one I can really go to say, hey, do you know much more about cell and gene therapy? So it's great that I get lots of responsibility, but it's also, you've got to be willing to teach yourself quite a few things. And, if it's something straightforward, like a company that makes, I don't know, tables, that's fine. But if it's a company that has cryptocurrency, that can be more challenging. But there is support out there. The senior people will teach you how to learn. You can speak to experts in the field. There are resources to help. But at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. So that's great, but also sometimes a little bit of pressure.
Brilliant. And Gillian, something that obviously we've all been affected by in some way or another this past year. So how has COVID affected the industry, and how has it affected like your job as well?
So I think that number one, become a lot more comfortable with technology. I think so many companies were forced to get themselves in a position where they would have to work efficiently and effectively without being face to face. So Teams, which we're using now, is something we're now using almost daily still, even though we're starting to go back into the office. We use Link, so Microsoft software to instant message each other. Bloomberg also has a chat which we use to speak internally and externally. All sorts of collaboration type software. So it's mostly, I think the biggest change is getting used to using technology like we didn't used to. We also used to meet management teams in person a lot more often, but now we're doing it more via technology too. We used to travel a lot more. I've not traveled with work in the past 18 months, which I'm okay with. It's probably a lot better for the environment. So it does make me feel better in that respect. I'd say that's been the biggest change for the industry here.
And Gillian, in regards to the next question, I feel that you have touched on this by saying that you're seeing like traineeships and stuff coming through the organisation a bit more, but are there training opportunities within like your type of job role?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're closed now, but we do open them once a year, and you're more than welcome to check out the Aberdeen website to find out more about what opportunities there are. But yes, you absolutely can join the trainee scheme. It's, I think, between 10 months and a year, and you're supported. You've got an induction program. You're with a group of other trainees from across the UK. I think they're based in our Edinburgh office and our London office, and I believe maybe Aberdeen as well. And that's a really, really useful way if you want to go straight from school. If you want to go from university, there's a 10-week internship, and then there's a graduate scheme, and you do 4 6-month rotations around slightly different teams and areas of the business. And in that case, there's lots of training, again, an induction. You'll probably get like a buddy or a mentor. So all of these sorts of low battery. All of these sort of people who are there to support you as well. So lots of opportunities, and it's not just our firm. Our competitors also have trainee schemes, apprenticeships, and graduate schemes.
Yeah, and Gillian, would you say that there has been anybody in particular that has influenced your career choice, like that has maybe motivated or inspired you to go into investment?
Well, that's actually quite an interesting question. So when I was at university studying accountancy and finance, without realizing, I don't think, there's this whole idea that, you know, success looks like something in particular. And for our course, success was becoming an auditor or consultant for the Big Four, perhaps, and maybe going into banking, but more so joining the Big Four. So a lot of the people who are ambitious, that's just what they really focused on. And I thought, well, I think I'd like to do well, so I guess I'll focus on that too. And it honestly would be a case of, you know, I'd ask my friends, oh, what are you going to do after uni? They're like, I want to be an accountant or like an auditor or a consultant for the Big Four. Then I'd go and ask my professors, oh, you should be, you know, an auditor or a consultant for the Big Four. That is success. So I went down that route, and I didn't really consider many other options. But Aberdeen Asset Management, as it was on the time, what was at the time, was on campus. And if I'm being honest, I didn't really consider investment management, not only because I was focused on accounting, but also because it didn't really seem like an industry that was open to me. I never really saw any females. I never really saw like many minorities. I never really got the impression people were state educated the way that I was. So it just didn't really feel like an environment that I really thought and I saw myself in. I didn't consciously say no, but I also didn't consciously say yes. But Aberdeen Asset Management, as it was at the time, was on campus. And I was like, it's on my way home. I'll probably get some, I don't know, some free sweets and some pens, which they always give out at those events. So I was like, oh, why not? And so I sat there for the presentation, and this graduate, so he would have been maybe just a couple of years older than me, and then a lady from HR talking about the world of investments and how you learn about companies and all these travel opportunities and all this choice. And I was like, hold on, there's this whole industry that I didn't even know really existed. And I clearly had misjudged it because I didn't know anyone in the industry as well. And he inspired me. So that was the graduate sort of doing essentially what I'm doing today. And if this sounds interesting to any of you, please, please, please do check out investment management as an industry and think about applying for traineeships, because that's how I got into the industry. So yeah, it was an individual talking about his day job, and I thought I would be good at that. And he told me, you sound like you'd be good at that. So yeah, I thought I'd give it a go, and I really love it.
Brilliant. And Gillian, what advice would you give a young person who is maybe considering this as a career path?
Okay, I would say when it comes to at least sort of like interviews and applications and things, what I think they would like to see is passion and enthusiasm for learning about the world, learning about things, learning about finance. And you can demonstrate that in so many ways. You can, you know, I, for example, was the treasurer of my society at university. So I think that demonstrated the fact that I was happy to work with numbers. I traveled a lot. They seemed to like the idea that I was willing to go out of my comfort zone and travel and learn about the world, because when you're investing, you've got to learn about different companies and different cultures too. So if you can get out there and do new experience, get new experiences, that would be really useful. If you really want to get really into it, you can do something called like going online and getting a dummy portfolio. So that basically means that. So in my team, there's one team that I'm in, we invest in, let's say, 50 different companies. And you do that because you don't want just one company, because let's say, you know, with WhatsApp, for example, and Facebook, earlier in the week, something bad there happened, and you don't want to find yourself in a bad situation if you put all your eggs in one basket. So you put 50 eggs in that basket. So if one egg drops and smashes, so if one company, let's say, goes bust, that's okay, because you've got 49 other companies. So what you can do is that we've got real money in there, like a lot of money, and we have to take a lot of responsibility, and we think about the risk. But what you can do is sort of like have fake money in there. So you pick 50 companies that you think are interesting. You go, oh, you know what, I really think that, I don't know, General Motors or Tesla is really interesting, so I'm going to put that in my basket, and create your own. And so when you then go into an interview, you can say, look, I have my own dummy portfolio. We lost money that day, but we gained money that way. But that's sort of like, if you really, really want to get into the nitty gritty. Honestly, I think the most important thing is to just get exposure to things. So it could be all sorts of jobs. When I joined the industry, my jobs were working at the Marriott Hotel and conference and banqueting. I'd worked at a pizza place near my house. I'd done a paper round, and I'd worked in a clothing store. All of those are really useful in one way or another, because you can go in an interview and say, I've got good communication skills because I had to deal with difficult customers in the store, or I've got good work ethic because I had to wake up every single day at 6:30 a.m. to deliver the papers. So it's a long-winded answer, but the point is, a lot of the skills that you need in my industry, you can gain elsewhere, and they're transferable. So you're not going to wake up and have all the skills to be a great investment manager, but you can prove that you've got skills which might be useful that you've learned and developed by getting exposure in other ways. So just expose yourself to stuff, do things, guides, Duke of Edinburgh, part-time jobs, all sorts of things.
And just on that topic, Gillian, like, what subjects would you recommend for a young person to do at school?
So it's an interesting one, because on my graduate scheme, when we started, we had people who'd studied all sorts. We had engineering students, people who'd studied French, those who'd studied Spanish. Yes, I'd done accountancy, and we had a few doing economics, but it's not as if everyone who'd come here with straight, maths and further maths with more maths and chemistry. So really, the people who've come into my industry, at least at my firm, have very varied backgrounds. So it's a difficult question, because some say go for what you enjoy and what you're good at. If I think about what would be useful in the industry, maths isn't necessarily, I don't use much maths in my day job, and I'm happy to go into that later. But if you do have maths and you are good at maths, it might be a useful one. And if not maths, then something else a bit technical. I don't know, maybe computer sciences, maybe business management might be useful, or chemistry, something that shows that you're able to be a little bit technical. But in actual fact, I think what's most important is that you get decent grades in subjects that you're good at and enjoy, and you can pivot down the line, because we have people who studied music who work at my firm.
And Gillian, again, you'd mentioned this earlier about not having that sort of crystal ball to predict things and stuff like that, but one of the questions that has come in, do you think that currency in the future will be more digital, or and no more coins and notes and things like that?
Even the governor of the Bank of England doesn't know the answer to that question. That's a great one, and he has been asked that question. I think it will certainly be a lot less physical. So I think if you look at China, for example, they're slowly phasing out the physical stuff, and they're bringing in more digital currencies. And actually, I think the UK and the EU is still deciding on whether they want to have a digital currency. So not exactly the same as Bitcoin and Ethereum that you may have heard of, but an equivalent that's run by the government, which is managed by the government. So slightly different. In terms of general keeping the same currency, but is it cash, or is it like you're using credit and debit cards? COVID really accelerated that, to the point where I'm visiting London, and there are some places already that say, sorry, we don't take any cash. And I was like, hold on, you're not going to take my money. So yeah, I think we're moving that way, because it's good in terms of money laundering. So when people do illegal activity, it's easier to follow that when they use card as opposed to cash. So quite often it's preferred that people use cards because it's easier to track digitally. But only time will tell. And like I said, there are 2 steps. So there's basically having the same pound, but having the coin, and there's also having a digital cryptocurrency. But I'll give you my email, and if anyone wants to go into it more, I'll happily do that, but I don't want to bamboozle everyone.
Brilliant. And Gillian, I've just got a couple more questions for you here just before we finish up. But one of the other questions, are there any projects that you've worked on or been a part of that you're particularly proud of?
Yes, I would say recently, and I won't mention it by name, but I'll certainly talk about the industry. So I spent a lot of time working on this company that's specifically in that cell and gene therapy space. And I met the management team, and it's really amazing what they're trying to do. They're enabling us to understand our bodies so that we can create medicines that are more effective, medicines that are particular to you and I. Stefan, for example, you and I right now, if we go to the doctor, will be given the same drug. But in future, I'll be given drugs that work for my genes, and you'll be given drugs that work for your genes. So it's really cool to be able to research a company like that. I then did all the work, ended up working quite late, even though we very rarely do that. If you manage your time well, you can finish at 5:30. So not all the stereotypes about how hard you work in finance are true. So we do have reasonable hours. So anyway, I did all the research. It was the first time I met the management team, and I gave it to my managers. And they said, okay, we're going to decide to invest in this company. And in the space of a week, it's gone up, 30%. So that's great, because I know now our clients have made money from something that I did, but also what we invested in is good for society. This company is doing something to help in the medical field. So yeah, I felt good because it was a job well done, and we're helping a really good company from my perspective. So I'd say that's one of the projects, yeah.
Brilliant. It sounds really exciting there as well, Gillian. And Gillian, just the final question, what would you say the gender balance is like within your job department?
So my company actually won an award recently for having one of the best gender ratios in the industry. So I can comfortably say that I believe we are at the forefront. I would be lying if I said that investment management was an industry which was representative when it comes to any firm of any sort of gender equality. I think the stat came out recently that only 7 to 8% of the funds, of the amount of money you could say that's invested in our industry, is invested by females. So, when I keep talking about, I do some research and I hand it to a person senior. So that's the level I'm referring to. So we've got a long way to go. But if I look below me at the graduates, it really is looking quite good. We're seeing great gender equality at that level. So I think it's just going to take some time to feed in. But I'd absolutely say that there is space for young females, and you're very, very welcome. And if you need any support, there's a charity called Future Asset that helps young females in Scotland get into investment management. So I'd definitely say reach out to them.
Gillian, thank you. That's been absolutely fantastic. So that's us come to the end of today's session. You can find out more about careers at www.myworldofwork.co.uk. You'll find loads of different information there that can help you make choices about your career. And if you also need some further inspiration on what type of things you can do, there's tools on there to help you with that. If you want to learn more about apprenticeships within Scotland, you can check out apprenticeships.scot. And for any information on digital careers, you can also check out digitalworld.net. You can also speak to your school careers advisor, as they will have much more information and guidance available for you, and they're there to support you on your journey as well. So that is us come to the end of the session. I would just like to say a big thank you to Gillian for joining me today. You've been absolutely fantastic, and just the way you've articulated everything there as well, Gillian, is really, really appreciated. Personally, I found it really interesting, and I hope that everyone else has also as well. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, it has been recorded, so you can review it as many times as you want at a later date, and have a look and list of future sessions that are coming up as well. And once again, thank you for joining the session. I hope you've got a lot out of it. Take care.